Hi everyone. So today I'm going to talk about Azure, how to migrate a virtual machine from on-premises to Azure. So the agenda of this meeting will be introducing to VMware cloud migration, defining cloud migration goals, migration approaches, and planning the migration. So let's get into it. Introduction to VMware cloud migration. So VMware Cloud Migration enables organization to modernize infrastructure, reduce in cost and gain flexibility, and we can utilize more of Azure services. Any services that we have in Azure, we can utilize it and integrate with our applications and everything. So migration involves moving workloads from on-premises data center to cloud environment, empowering which will empower organization to innovate faster by scaling application efficiently. The key consideration for migration would be data security and compliance and performance requirement. And as I said before, integration. So the business event, what are the business event which will help us understanding, which will help us move to migrate to Azure. So data center exit will help us, companies leaving physical data center often migrate to cloud to reduce cost by avoiding expensive hardware and maintenance, which will drastically reduce the cost for the maintaining the hardwares that we have in data center. Merger or acquisition during merger, integrating an IT systems can be very much of complex. On premises can have multiple environment. The cloud migration help you reducing the vendors and complex, technical complexity in terms of any workloads that we have in on premises. Reduction in capex, moving to cloud means less spending on physical infrastructure, where you can go for a lot of reservations so that you would get benefits out of, by reserving the environment in Azure. So lifecycle management again, as end of support for critical technologies will. When an older system lose supports, migrate to cloud ensures the greater business flexibility and agility. Compliance changes. The new regulation might require enhancing security or reporting cloud migration, enables adapting to new compliance requirement. And some industries need storing data in a specific region. So as everybody knows that Azure has a data center across the globe, and we can choose which data center or which region that we need to have our data resides at rest. Uh, if stability and minimizing disruptions are the key goals, migrating to cloud allows scaling and meeting the global and the local demands. You can scale up as and when required, or you can reduce it as and when business is normal. So now let's get into VMware migration to Azure. So there are two options that we have to migrate to Azure. One is Azure Migrate, and second is integration and interoperability. So Azure Migrate on on-premises VM runs a workload by using Azure Infrastructure as a Service, managing VMs with Azure Resource Manager. Here we will be implementing an appliance server. When we are choosing Azure Migrate option, we will be running an Azure appliance server in our local data center in vCenter, and which will help us migrate and discover the server and migrate the server to Azure. Integration and interoperability. Here we will have our bare metal solution available in Azure as an VMware solution. You can utilize, run the native workloads on Azure bare metals, and you can utilize the same UI to control your on-premises VM and also your online Azure VM. Uh, in this session, we are going to look into Azure Migrate option using agentless. So there are multiple options that you have. When we are running in on-premises data center, everything will be bare metal and then a virtual machine. Even your application will run in a virtual machine. Your database will run in virtual machine. But when it comes to Azure, you can choose what is your requirement. So assessing an on-premises VM, Hyper-V, and virtualization, move them to Azure as a virtual machine, as an infrastructure, as a code. You can move your VM as a VM in Azure. Whereas in your SQL Server, you can move them as a virtual machine in Azure, or you can move it as a managed instance or SQL database in Azure, where you can pay only for the utilization that you're doing. So you no need to worry about the infrastructure or the complexity of the data and configuring the database. Azure App Service, you might be running your application in an in IaaS or Apache or Tomcat, whichever the app service that you are running in your on-premises. You can migrate it to Azure, and you can utilize the app service or app service environment in Azure, which can help you drastically reduce your cost and drastically reduce your maintenance and everything. And as we discussed in the previous poll, you could see that Azure VMware solution increase in business agility, where you can migrate your VMware as a bare metal solution, and you can integrate both, and you can run both environment from a single UI here. So evaluating your current setup, the assessment phase, environment assessment. Before we do a migration, certainly we need to have our VM inventory, like all the items, CPU, memory, storage, and OS. What is dependencies, the application dependencies, and compatibility check with everything. So discovering server using an appliance. As I said before, we will be using an appliance server, which is nothing but a virtual machine. We will be deploying it in vCenter, any vCenter host. That particular application server, that particular appliance server will help us discover the environment, and it will help us migrate from on-premises to online Azure. So the prerequisite is certainly everybody will have their own Azure account and prepare a VMware environment for the discovery. Yes, certainly we will have a VMware environment also. That is why we are in this webinar. And apart from that, we need to create a project in Azure portal and set up the Azure Migrate appliance is a basic step that we need to do, and start continuous discovery, and we can do the migration. So let's get into that now. So as you can see in the screen, we just need to log into Azure portal using global admin, or you can utilize the owner permission to the particular subscription, or you can have contributor permission to particular subscription, and you need to create Azure Migrate service. So once you create the service, you can see that the first one is generate a project key, name your appliance, make sure that you name your appliance and generate the proper project key. So the project key is very important. We will be using the same project key in next upcoming slides. And once it's been done, you need to download the OVA file, which will be around 8 to 12 GB of size. So now I am in vCenter, where I have selected my host, and I'm deploying that particular OVA file in the vCenter. So this OVA file is nothing but the virtual machine that we talked about before as an appliance server. So this is what is going to help us migrate from on-premises to online. So the prerequisite for this machine is we should have 32 GB of RAM and 8 vCPUs and 80 GBs of disk space. And you could see here, I have configured everything in the screenshot, where we just need to follow the on-screen instruction and select the name and folder from your vCenter, and create an storage account. Select the storage account and select the right network, and hit finish. Your appliance will be ready in 5 to 10 minutes. Now, the appliance server has been deployed, and now we need to configure that appliance server here. So log into appliance server as an administrator, and the setup prerequisite wizard will automatically pop up through the browser. And first we need to check the connectivity to Azure, and it will connect. If you have any proxy servers, make sure that you select the correct proxy servers here. Add the proxy details here so that it would connect to the Azure. Next, it will check the time sync between Azure and the machine, and next, check the latest update and register the appliance. The registering appliance is where we need to paste the project key that we collected in the previous slide from the Azure portal. Uh, so, and verify that project key. Once it has been verified, it will do an automatic update for this virtual machine. So make sure that it has been completed. Next, add your Azure credential here so that it will talk to Azure Migrate service so that it will be in communication. So you need to have required permission, either the owner permission for the subscription, or you can be a global admin also. Next, in virtual disk deployment kit is installed. This particular exe file is mandatory one. Is an update file that has been released by Microsoft, and make sure that you are downloading this file and you are pasting it in C program files VMware virtual disk deployment kit. Next, credential manager, add vCenter credential, select the add credential, enter the username and password for vCenter server account to discover the server. So this particular virtual machine should have credential of your vCenter, and also it should have credential of Azure. So only then it can communicate with both, and it can start discovering your on-premises, and it will help us migrate to online. So select add discovery source, enter the IP address or FQDN of the vCenter, and choose a friendly name for the credential, and leave the port as 443 or specific. You can customize your port as per the requirement, but it should be opened in the other end also, and validate the connection. And if you want to discover your applications, make sure that you provide the credential of your application servers, whether it can be ASP.NET or it can be SQL database or it can be any database, but make sure that you are giving the credential and it has been mapped below. So once it has been done, you will be able to start discovering the server. On bottom right corner, you could see that the ongoing discovery count, which is 23 so far. And now you see the discovery phase has been completed, and we have discovered around 36 servers, 3 SQL, and 1 web app. And on the appliance, you can see that it is registered 1. So this is what the server that we have just configured as an appliance server. Next, assessment. In assessment is where Azure will help us try and understand what we are going to do in terms of estimation or readiness or supportability or saving cost. So how much I'm going to spend once I move to Azure. You will get you will get the answers before you migrate to Azure also. So in assessment, you can choose a batch. Hundreds of VMs can be assessed at a single given point of time, and it can be checked upon on OS, license, Windows version compatibility, and you can do savings in terms of reserving. In Azure, we have 1 year or 3 year reservation, where you can get benefits out of 60 to 40 to 60%, I believe. So next is what this is how the assessment looks like, how much we have saved, and for one particular VM that we have selected for assessment, we are going to pay for $68 around. Next, we will be starting the replicate because the replication will use Azure Site Recovery, and it will use storage account, and it will use recovery service vault. So how it's going to happen is what is described in this slide. So start replicating. Select VM from replication. Azure Site Recovery initiates a job to manage data transfer, beginning data tracking, and replication. Initial replication, it will take the full backup of the on-premises VM and it copy to the Azure storage account, transfer all the data to create an identical copy in cloud using recovery service vault. Delta replication is where it's going to check for the changes which happened, recent changes happened in the source VM, So it will keep on checking the changes in the source VM, and it will start replicating. Test migration, it is optional, but we recommend to do it, because once you do test migration, you will know that your application and your data, if it is intact, or if the configuration is all good, or if you want to change it. So you can do all the possibility checks in the test migration, and you can start the actual migration, and you can stop it. So now in replicate, now we are ready to replicate VM in Azure Storage and Recovery Service Vault, following by the testing and migrating to the production. So as I said before, you can replicate up to 100 VMs at once. For more, you need to create multiple batches. You can create multiple batches, and you can start multiple batches, and you can add number of VMs. A number of, I mean, 100 maximum is 100. You can choose up to our convenient, and start the replication. So Azure Migrate uses Azure Site Recovery, requires and Site Recovery Vault to store replicated data of your VM, which uses recovery point and manages the replication policies. Continuous data replication. ASR will take care of your continuous replication, which is the delta replication will happen through ASR. So replication process flow, here is where you need to start selecting the virtual network in Azure. And if you want to change your virtual machine name, or you want to change the compute of the VM, you can choose everything here, a disk, and you can start replicating. So now you can see that the replication has been completed and replication health is healthy, but the test migration status, it still shows that it is pending. So either you can do a test migration and check the validate your authenticity of your data, or you can check the configuration details, everything in Azure, which I have done here. So I have tested the migration, and I have logged into Azure, and I have checked all the configurations in Azure. So before we log into that machine, that particular migrated VM should have RDP enabled. In order to do that, that particular VM should have either you can log into that VM through public IP, or you can have an NSG created, a network security group created, and make sure port 3389 is open for that VM to log in. So you can have a secondary VM created in Azure itself to log in, or you can have a public IP address login from public through 3389. Now the test migration has been completed as here. Now we can clean up the test migration, and we can actually start the actual migration. Select migrate to initial the final replication. The steps prompt you to shut down the virtual machine briefly to prevent the data loss. Um, Once you start replicating, your source VM will be shut down for brief moment, so that it will actually do the cutover and migrate it to Azure. And once it has been migrated, you can utilize all the services. That means Defender or Azure Backup or monitoring tool, everything that can be utilized in the VM. So Azure Defender, I would recommend to enable Azure Defender for all the workloads that you have in Azure, because it gives much better advice. So regarding that particular VM and its configuration.